Film. I love film. I love the look and feel of it. I love the colours, the grain, the glow, the overall vintage vibe you get from it. There's nothing quite like it. I've shot Super 8 in the past and absolutely loved the results, and I'd love to shoot 16 or 35mm in the future. Honestly, if I could, I'd shoot everything on film, but unfortunately that's just not all that practical. Film is expensive, time-consuming, and not the easiest format to work with. I'll do more videos on this in the future, but essentially film just isn't a practical format to use for the majority of us on a regular basis. So instead, we've got to shoot digital and emulate the look of film. But how do we do that? Well, the easiest way to do that is to use film emulation software such as Dehancer Pro. Dehancer Pro has a huge array of motion picture and still photography film to choose from. It has everything from Kodak Vision 350D all the way to Ilford HP5. It also has a ton of effects including accurate film grain, halation, bloom, vignette, overscan, and tons more. So for full disclosure, the team from Dehancer did approach me and asked me to do an honest review of the Dehancer Pro software. I do get to keep the license with this review, and they have also provided me with a discount affiliate link, which I'll give more information on at the end of this video. So while I do intend to be honest and fair with this review, it is worth keeping that in mind. Dehancer is available on a variety of platforms including Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Adobe, which is the one I'm testing out today. You do have to select the platform you want before you buy it, as it's not cross-compatible, and I don't believe you can swap the license once you've bought it, so be sure to choose the right one for you. Dehancer comes in a Pro version, which is $449, that's the one I'm testing today. There is also a light version for $199 as of making this video, and there are also a few photo apps and a few specific apps to different platforms. There is also an iOS app, which unfortunately I didn't get to try as I don't have an iPhone, but that is available as well. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm using the Adobe plugin version of this, and if you just installed it and you're trying to find it, can't find it, look for your effects tab, scroll down to video effects, and then look for film emulation, and you'll find Dehancer Pro there. Now you can either drag it onto the clip or onto an adjustment layer, whichever way you like to work. So first things first, you'll need to look at your input. Now by default it's set to Rec 709, so if you've used a Rec 709 LUT and just want to go to the next step, then by all means do that. For this process though, I'm actually going to go through their log conversion. So if you scroll down for Rec 709, look for choose camera, and then for this one that's an S52X, so S52 should be fine. Look for Vlog, and there you go, it's applied a Rec 709 look, and you'll also notice that it has also applied a basic film look. So by default it goes to Kodak Vision 3250D, but I think I'm going to go and use Ektachrome E100 on this. I just like the look there, and you can see it's already changed that to a degree. So the next thing to look at is the film developer. Now I normally like to put the contrast up around about 30, and the contrast looks quite nice. And then color boost, I'm going to put it on to about 50, and there you go, you get that nice warm golden sun, because it was sort of that golden hour. You can also go back up here as well and do exposure comp, so I can boost it a little bit there, so I might put up a little bit. And then you've got your usual temperature controls, so you can do a lot of that. Then you can look at film compression. So basically it's effectively affecting the white point. So if I enable that, you'll see then that the hot points of the sun in the middle have kind of been sort of subdued. So there's it off and there's it on. You can actually make it more intense, make it like 110. And then we come down to film prints. So you don't just have film stocks, and you can just use film stocks if you want. You're not sort of beholden, you don't have to use a film print. By default it's set to linear, which basically doesn't really do anything. The kind of go-to one would be this Kodak 2383 print film. But obviously, as you can see, it does add quite a lot of contrast and does drop the shadows quite a lot. So what you can then do is adjust, you can adjust the exposure here again. That's obviously coming up a little bit too high, so I'll probably leave it about there. You can also change target white. Target white ends up being cooler or warmer. So again, I'll probably leave that at 0, but you can play around with that. Again, I don't know all the if and outs of it yet. I've only had this for a few weeks. Generally speaking, I'm just sort of trusting my eye with it. You also have some basic color correction tools. So, if you enable it here, that's a point to mention as well. If you're adjusting sliders and nothing's happening, you might just need to click enable beneath it, because a lot of them by default are not enabled. So here, for instance, if I want to make it more yellowy, then I can, or more bluey. And then we come down here, and then film grain is enabled by default. Again, from here, you have a load of presets. You've got 8mm from 50 to 500, all the way to 65mm, again, from 50 to 500. Main thing with film grain, if you've never used it before, YouTube's not the best for it, so you kind of need more pronounced grain. So for that reason, I'd probably suggest if you want grain and put it on YouTube, maybe go 16mm. You can also customize it and do a load of stuff. But again, I think the presets that they have here are really actually quite good. So I tend to just leave it. You can probably see there's some grain going on there in the background. Now, halation, again, you can customize it. Personally, I would just leave it as it is. That's it off. That's it on. There's just a little slight glow going on, but you can always play around with these settings. And then you can add a second level, which is called bloom, and that does this. So you get more of a glow coming through there, which again, for these kind of shots, it's great. You can also do film damage. So the 35mm film damage here will be quite subtle. If I set it to 8mm here, you should see more of it there. Yeah, so that's film damage at 8mm. So if you want it to look really, really kind of scuffed up, you can do. I quite like the 35mm damage one. It's just really subtle, but it just looks like it's taken from a film scan rather than digital, so it's quite nice. So the next thing you can add is film breath and gate weave, and that adds some of that kind of flickery, wobbly quality that you get from film, especially in older films where they didn't necessarily stabilize everything. So with both of them off, again, if I just full screen that, that's what it looks like currently. And then if you enable film breath and gate weave, you'll see slightly more flickering, and the film kind of wobbles around a little more in the gate. It's very subtle, but again, it just adds that extra kind of detuned effect that you would get from shooting celluloid film. The other two things to look at is you can do an overscan. So if we do widescreen 35mm and then enable it, you can see we've got an overscan here. So what it does is it basically just adds an overlay, and then you can have a non-static gate, i.e. it moves around a bit more. Again, that's quite a heavy overlay, so you can always scale it up a bit if you just want like kind of almost like the edges of something. Maybe just something like that. You can do that and you don't lose too much of your image then. And you've just got a little something there as if it was sort of an overscan from the lab. You can add a vignette, just adds a little something else. And then again, with that mixed with the gate weave and the film breath, and the film damage, I don't think this is going to play back very well, but you really start to get, it's not going to show up too well on there, but again, I'll show some examples later in the video, but you really start to get quite a cool looking film look. And then let's actually have a look at one with people in shot. So here is Jenny and me. Let's go to input again, choose camera. We're on the S5 II. So let's go down to Panasonic S5 II. Right, for this one, I'm actually gonna go for something really weird. So this Prokudin Gorski 1906. Okay, so let's have a little look in the old film developer. So I think that's near enough reasonably well exposed. Let's just see what happens when you do the contrast. So bump up the contrast there, that's looking nice. Let's do a bit of a color boost. Yeah, so already, actually, it's looking rather nice. Let's also do, again, the film compression. So again, it just sort of pulls down those hot spots, those sort of brighter bits. I think I'm going to go without doing film print this time. I think I'm going to boost the contrast a little more. And then exposure, I think we're about there. I think, to be honest, I kind of like that as it is. Obviously, you can do a load more with that. I know I've kind of rushed through it here, but just to basically show you how this all works, let's also, just for good measure, add a bit of halation and bloom. So yeah, look, that gives it quite a kind of glowy effect there. Probably a little too much, but that's kind of fun still. Maybe if we turn off bloom, that's more like it. Yeah, so just got a little something going on in the faces. So there we go, that's just a quick run through of the software and basically how it works in Adobe. So I've been using Dehancer Pro for a couple of weeks now, and I've tried it on a bunch of different videos. First thing I tried to do was regrade a few existing videos that I'd shot. The very first one I tried was my island travel film that I shot back in May. And I gotta say, on first impressions, I was really impressed with the colors and the effects, especially with how easy it was to get the colors looking nice and how real the film grain and halation and the bloom bloom and everything just looked on screen on the final export. So for the island film, I used Kodak Vision 3 250D film stock for the emulation, and then I played around with the developing tools to add some contrast and color and make it look nice and saturated without being too overpowering. I did have to do a little bit of additional work in Lumetri color, but it was just a little bit on the green so they weren't popping ridiculously. They're still popping, but less so. I did also add the Kodak 2383 print film at the end to really complete the look. Now, it's not something you have to do, but again, as I mentioned, it's something that can look really nice, and I think it works really well with the Vision 3 film stocks. In terms of effects, I added the 35mm film grain, I also added halation and bloom on their default settings, and I also added the film damage effect and the gate weave and film breath, and I've got to say the final result is stunning. I was really impressed. I'm much happier with this color grade than the original one I did. Jenny, my wife, even came in and said that it did look like it had been shot on film, so that's really great. And I've got to say what I really liked about it was just how easy it was to get to that stage. I didn't have to do a ton of work. You just need a little bit of color grading knowledge, but nothing that you can't easily learn on YouTube anyway. As mentioned, I did have to add a little bit of Lumetri on top of some of the clips just to correct it, because Dehancer doesn't have what I'd say is a complete set of exposure tools, but they are pretty comprehensive and you can get away with only using that if you so wish. So next up, I decided to regrade the spoken word film I shot at the end of 2023. This was on my S5 IIX shot in Blackmagic RAW. I was kind of interested to see how RAW performs in Dehancer versus the H.265 footage that I'd shot in Ireland. This time around, I wanted to go for more of a 16mm look, so I chose 16mm grain and a 16mm overscan. And for the film stock, I actually went for the Ektachrome 100 this time, which didn't need as much in terms of saturation in the film developing stage, and also really does have that classic 1970s vintage look. A lot of old 60s and 70s 8mm film will have been shot on things like Ektachrome and Kodachrome reversal film, so this kind of comes a lot closer to that vintage look which I wanted for this video. I also tried out the Fujifilm 3513 stock this time just to see how it played, and again, really nice. Like last time, I also added the film damage, the film breath and the gate weave to really give it that 16mm look, and as mentioned, I also used the film overscan and just scaled it up so you just got kind of the edge of those sprocket holes. So obviously I've talked about all the great things with the color and the film effects, but that really leads me on to the main negative of this software, and that is the processing and rendering time. It is slow, like really slow at times. Now, my computer can handle it and I can get real-time playback, but not consistently. It does stutter, it does get bogged down, even on a really powerful computer, and that unfortunately is just due to the way that the software is built. It's very resource heavy. Now, you can achieve real-time playback if you turn off the effects and just use the color and developing tools. But again, if you're wanting to preview the effects, you kind of need to turn them on for a bit, play for a bit, and then as soon as it starts jumping, you got to turn them off again, which really isn't ideal and is kind of a bummer. And the fact that you have to basically wait until the final video's rendered to be able to really preview it at all is kind of a bummer. While the results are absolutely incredible, I can see why the software takes up as much resource as it does, it still feels like it needs to be better optimized. And as I mentioned, it's not just playback times, it's render times. So for reference, on this system with a grade and an edit in sort of various formats, if I've got a 3-minute film, I'm probably looking at anywhere between 3, 5, 10 minutes at the most for an export, unless it's a really heavy grade with a lot of effects on it. Whereas when I did some test exports with like the Island video, what would normally take 3 to 5 minutes to export on my previous grade took 2.5 hours, nearly 3 hours. That's a huge jump in time. So I did actually reach out to support and ask them about this, and their recommendation is to shoot and edit entirely in ProRes. So it's something to consider. I did try a bit of ProRes stuff and it did seem to be quicker. So if you know you're going to use Dehancer for your project, it might be worth shooting or converting to ProRes. H.265 encoding especially, it just really gets bogged down. However, Dehancer does have a workaround, and that is the LUT creation. Now off the bat, I've got to say the LUT creation does not include things like film grain, halation, bloom, any effects. What it does include is all the colors and the film stock and the print and that sort of thing. What you can do is basically get your film colors where you want them, export the LUT, and then you can take Dehancer off and just import the LUT onto the footage, and you can basically run the film colors without needing to run Dehancer all the time. That is a really nice and efficient workaround. That's actually what I've done for the kind of talking head parts of this video, just for efficiency's sake. So it is nice to know that I've got that, and it's nice to know that if I create a look without effects, I could then potentially send it off to another editor if I needed to and go, right, use this look. That's really good. But obviously, if you do still want to use the effects, you do still need to have the software running, which again will slow down render time. So that again is something to really consider if you're wanting to use this software. So next up, I'm going to show you some test shots that I've done, firstly around my house, just to kind of show an example of how you can build the effect out, all the way from color right the way through to the overscan and all the other effects. And then these following shots are from a test location shoot I did the other day. I've tried to show a whole variety of different film stocks and effects in this, so you'll see a fairly noticeable change between each shot, and hopefully it illustrates the breadth of different effects that you can get, but I'm also hoping it's not too jarring as well. And again, I'll include text on each clip saying which stock I've used and which effects I've applied. So there we have it, Dehancer Pro. I absolutely love the colors and effects you can get out of it, and some of the film stocks in particular are really just magical and vintage, and I just love the overall vibe and feel of them. I think an absolute standout for me is the Kodak Ektachrome 100. I just love the look of that film, and to be able to emulate that quite accurately is really, really cool. The film print emulation is a really nice addition too. It really completes the look, particularly of the Kodak Vision 3 stocks, and it's not something I've seen in a lot of other film emulation software. The effects too are really, really impressive. I love the inclusion of gate weave, of film breath, of the vignetting, of the overscan, of the film damage, all things that added together really, really go towards making digital shot footage look a lot more like film. What's really nice is that it's all included within the same program, so I don't have to build up a ton of layers. It's all just apply or don't apply, which is really, really nice. And overall, the core effects like grain and halation look really, really good, really, really organic. And overall, it's some of the best implementation I've seen from film emulation software. Something I do hope to see in the future, and I think it is mentioned on their FAQ that they are looking into it, is full-on presets. So you can select a Vision 350D and have all the settings done for you, because by default you have to do a little bit of work to make it look the way you want, which again you would expect, but also it's nice to just have some presets built in. However, As I've mentioned, the main downside is the slowness in the processing and rendering. The moment you add Dehancer to any of your footage or an adjustment layer, you just feel your whole system slow right down. As I said, this is mostly down to effects such as halation and grain, which require quite a lot of computing power due to the detailed way they analyze scenes and create the film effect. Dehancer did actually put out a blog post about this, so I'll link that in the description, but it kind of does explain a bit more about why the processing is as slow as it is. Now, generally, I'm happy to work around slow processing. I've had very slow computers in the past and still been able to produce what I want. So for my own projects, passion projects, or client work where I don't have a particularly tight deadline, then I could absolutely see myself using this. And yes, okay, having to be quite patient with the export times, but it's something that I can work around if time constraints aren't an issue. However, the reality is that a lot of my client work, whether it's promotional videos or weddings, is quite time sensitive and can build up really quickly. And then if you've got something in the pipeline that's slowing you down, it slows down the whole process. Realistically, if I want to use Dehancer Pro for my client work, I'm probably more likely to do all the colors and then create a LUT and apply it separately. And if I want effects like halation and grain, I'd probably have to use other more efficient software that granted may not have as good results, but they would be good enough and would be far more efficient in terms of client delivery. I think something that Dehancer could benefit from would be some kind of fast or optimized option that you can enable. I still think there's a lot of value in the full processed version that takes a little while longer, but to have a more efficient option you can enable that maybe isn't quite as detailed but provides you with much quicker render times would be hugely valuable for professionals who are trying to use this. So would I recommend this software? Well, for me, I probably would buy it. That's the sort of thing that I would be interested in, especially if I was wanting to kind of up my film emulation game, and I could see myself using it quite a lot. As much as the slow playback and render times are a pain, the results, to me at least, are well worth it, and I can definitely see myself using this quite a lot in the future. As I've said, for passion projects or bigger projects where time constraints aren't such an issue, I would absolutely use this. However, I don't think this is for everyone. If you're just starting out with filmmaking or you very occasionally want to do film emulation, then probably DaVinci Resolve's built-in film emulation would be a better choice. It is still really good and you can get some great results with it. This just obviously has a lot more options, so if you're more interested in film emulation, then this is much more worth considering. If you already have film emulation software such as Film Convert, then maybe give the trial a go. But if you do a lot of film emulation and you want to take that to the next level, then I think this software could be potentially the one to buy. And if you are someone who has decided they want to buy Dehancer Pro or any of their other desktop applications, you can use my affiliate code SRI to get 10% off your order. Please note though, this does not work with the iOS app, it's desktop apps only. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this was interesting. Please do remember, if you did enjoy it, to give it a like, a comment, and subscribe with notifications on. I'm trying to upload a couple of times a month, usually on Thursdays, so do be on the lookout for other kind of filmmaking and videography based videos. I've got a few more behind the scenes videos in the pipeline, so those will be coming out pretty soon. Other than that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.